The first time I've used the new computer for a pod. Yeah.
Look at you. Your lighting's always so good. I need to
You're
go
lying,
over.
right? Because you're always.
No, I'm not. Actually, I need to turn my light back on.
Well, you told me to put it like.
Let's talk about Jordan since he's not on yet. I might have to go over to his house and just do his lighting for him. I've tried to coach him through it. He's just a dude. And, you know, us girls know how to light things. You know what I mean?
And us millennials, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm more of a Gen Z, but yeah.
This is true.
So Super Bowl, you know, we kind of had to just get the early results in because, you know, we publish it at the God unholy hour, 4:15 Central. And, so I was just reading kind of the ad hoc reviews and Ad Week and Ad Age and stuff. So Molson Coors, they did really well. Ad Week put it in their top 10. And then I thought it was interesting let me pull it up. This group, some firm.
Oh, wait. Ito? The one that drives,
yeah. Ito, that tracks engagement and like social media. Yeah, they said that even though the ad didn't have any celebrities, which is very unusual, this is what they said. Far and away stole the show, outperforming the median Super Bowl ad by nearly 6.8 times. Cheers. I thought it was interesting, though, that there was a little backlash on Twitter. Of course, Twitter, right? That,
Elon's wasteland.
Yeah, they're like, well, I didn't even know Blue Moon was owned by a big corporate brewery. Do you think that backlash has any merit, or is that just a tiny loud?
I don't think so. First of all, I don't think there's no way they didn't think about that, right? But
yeah,
I think we're over caring about, you know, backlash to corporate buyouts. By the way, I mean, Jesus, if you don't know that Blue Moon is owned by MC by now, are you just now going to care enough? I mean, that's not a real Blue Moon drink. Like,
yeah, I tend to agree. And speaking of Jesus, what was that? I mean, it was a feel good ad, but who paid for that?
I forget. It's some evangelical lobby that Hobby Lobby is part of and all that. Yeah.
Well, so I love that there's this like tech multi-millionaire that really has it out for Tesla and Elon Musk, and he personally paid for regional ads. I noticed in every state how, like in, you know, Albany and Austin and Washington, basically calling out Tesla self-driving is a
danger,
as an unsafe danger and a scam.
Those were pretty funny. I mean,
funny that they run over a toddler.
Well, they're like little bags. They're like automated bags that are moving super slowly, and like, you know, and then the Tesla like
just rams over it.
It's not. I mean,
I like the Tesla actually speeds up and like just like it swerves to hit the baby.
And then it says like 10 points, like a video game.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Little coins flight up in the sky.
I can laugh because I'm a parent. I
can laugh because I'm a Tesla owner. And
well, so am I, bro. But
bro,
I hate that car. And one day Elon is going to summon us all to the moon. I swear to God.
I love my Tesla. I don't know what's wrong with yours, and mine's all banged up and the sensors don't work, but I just still love it. I never have to go to the gas station or have my oil changed, which I don't know why I complain. I never changed my oil in my old cars either. That's a scam, Jordan, by the oil companies. Changing your oil. You can go 50,000 miles before you need an oil change. It comes from the bottom of the earth. It's dinosaur bones. Why does it need to be changed now? You know, after a couple of months.
We need to have like a fact check segment at the end of these pods.
And okay, mainstream media, Jordan.
Yeah, I mean, fake news, Jordan. I mean, you're right, Jordan. We do like make outlandish claims. That's what I love about the podcast. You can just say what you want, whether it's true or not.
Yeah, at the end of the week, we'll say, okay, here's what Harry said. Here's what Google says.
Yeah, Google's so right. Yeah. I only go by ChatGPT now.
Here's what Wikipedia says.
Wikipedia, which I think ChatGPT, all it does is read Wikipedia and just regurgitate it all back to you. I mean, they ought to be paying Wikipedia if they're going to pay a source and Quora.
To Don't get me
Well,
started on
Jordan, we were
that.
talking about Super Bowl. The Miller ad, although it did call out that Blue Moon is not actually a craft beer, which I think most people knew anyway, but it scored really well on engagement, 6.7 times the average Super Bowl ad. So that's not even, just ads in general, which was pretty high judging from the other ads with no celebrities.
Yeah. The way they set that up, I think it really didn't even matter what they put in the commercial.
Yeah.
I think that was the beauty of what they did, was all the legwork and all the anticipation leading up to it, and then giving viewers a reason to stay engaged with that ad and to look for that ad.
Right.
That
Right.
was
Really
pretty
smart.
special. Yeah.
They, like we said, they squeezed all the juice out of that 30 seconds that they could, and bringing in DraftKings for people to bet, and it didn't hurt that the game was exciting till the very end and everybody was still watching. I thought it was funny that Aviation Gen's website just crashed. I was pulling it up right at the 2-minute warning, and there was just nothing there. It was just a blank brown screen, the brown screen of death, the poop screen.
Oh God. I gotta give a shout out though, of course, to the Bud Light ad too, right? In ad meter, it got number 6. So
yep,
the hollowed ad meter broke the top 10.
Go ahead, Jordan.
I was gonna say, as far as just the spots go, to me that was the most creative. It was so simple, but making fun of just a terrible situation that everybody's been through. Yeah. And they had celebrities, but I mean, Miles Teller didn't talk. Miles Teller didn't talk. And so the dog, of course, too. I mean, who doesn't want a little Frenchie dancing?
I mean, who doesn't want that? You're right. And his wife, she's a good, I think she's an influencer. She's a good actress too. I thought her expressions were real spot on. Not, you kind of overlook like that, like it's easy to do, but when there's cameras and lights and all that, she acted very natural. Both of them did. Yeah, I thought it was a good ad.
Yeah. And you know what also about that ad is, we talked about how is Bud Light going to be funny. They don't have to be funny, but it was still entertaining and provided some laughs without being a clown. It wasn't like the dumb beer ads.
You mean like Sam Adams?
I wasn't going to say anything.
Hey, that was a good ad, man. So
Your
one of his
cousin
competitors,
Boston.
That was a good ad.
Let me call my ma.
It was so good. I mean, obviously it was just regional, but I mean, it was a really fun flip of the coin.
It was, but we always get write-ins from distributors and anybody else in the industry saying, I really wish they would do something a little more sophisticated, stop making us look like the clowns.
Well, that was one of the competitors, but yeah.
We are clowns. I mean, have you been to our summits compared to the Wine and Spirit Summit? It's different. I had said that the critics didn't make much of the 2 liquor ads, but actually the Crown Royal ad did register, I think, on ad weeks, like number 7 or something. The Canadian, I thought that was a good ad too.
That was fun.
The Foo Fighters guy.
It was kind of the wrong audience though, right? I mean, this is American football, right? I think it probably was pretty polarizing because we had a couple over and they were like, what? That's not right. And then they had to Google it. That wasn't, oh, well, he was born in Canada, but we made it here,
Right.
So that, no, it's always, go ahead.
Who can hate on Canada? I mean,
especially right now when we're sharing people in our airspace together.
I know. Look, you got those Mounties out there shooting down balloons, which I love. It's like when do y'all do this too, which is so condescending, but like how cute. The Canadians have an Air Force. Isn't that adorable?
They
little
Mounties.
Yeah, they're probably in biplanes. I mean, I don't know.
Nothing like highlighting Bev Alk and Canada knowing what Canada is doing right now with Bev alcohol. So
Yeah, right.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. For those at home, Canada, they're kind of, I don't know, kind of the equivalent of the FDA or whatever, suggested that 2 drinks a week was the appropriate amount to drink. And of course, for Canadians, that's like, what? 2 drinks a
What?
week?
Yeah.
Eh?
Eh?
It's like
Stress
telling
that.
somebody from Wisconsin, that how about we stop this nonsense and bring in Brandy Rand, my favorite, Brandy Rand.
Your favorite, just in general, right?
Just in general.
Of all people, well, we can
Yeah.
let her know.
While she's connecting, I'll tell you, you know what I love about Brandy Rand?
Hi.
Brandy, there you are. I was
Hi,
just
here's
telling
my name, so I decided.
I was telling everybody what I love about Brandy Rand. And what I love about Brandy Rand is she takes all the data and she turns it into a simple narrative that even an idiot like I can understand. And so, Brandy, thank you for being on BeerNet Radio. This is the podcast where all your dreams come true. And I hope we fulfill on that promise. And Jen, why don't you properly introduce Brandy for our audience at home?
This is Brandy. If you need an introduction, Brandy, you've recently gotten, you're now COO of IWSR Global, right?
Chief Strategy Officer, yes.
Awesome. Yeah, CSO of Global. So welcome. And we just had Brandy speak at our summit. She's always, like Harry said, super provocative and engaging. And so we thought we'd just have a little follow-up session. And as I told you earlier, my acronym for this quick and dirty pod is SOS, right? We want to cover Super Bowl, we want to cover on-premise, and we want to cover spirits, kicking beer's butt.
Wait. Making acronyms for the podcast. They told me, Brandy, you can't turn writers into broadcasters. And I said, watch me. And here we are making acronyms on the fly. I've got lights blinking in the background. I mean, come on.
I've been watching lots of local news.
Yeah. It's perfect. And I literally got off a plane from Phoenix yesterday. So I feel like today is like such a fun day because we kind of are winging this just a little bit. So kudos to Jen for coming up with a really good acronym. And then also I feel like the day after the Super Bowl, everybody wants to talk about the commercials. That's the only reason I watched, and I haven't had a chance to talk to anyone about it. So I really want to dive in a little bit.
Just give us your impressions. We were kind of going back and forth about, a Canada Crown Royal, fun time to be doing that. Yeah. And of course, Molson Coors, but the surprise, it's a Blue Moon ad. And then of course, Anheuser-Busch had just a few in the broadcast, and Hold did really well. So any general impressions, favorites, thoughts?
I did love the kind of trifecta beer one. I thought it was really clever, right? So I always look at, is this going to make me laugh, right? First of all, it was interesting to see so many different liquor ads. I did feel like a lot of the commercials were, and I think in general, were really trying hard to, everyone be nice and happy, and like, it felt there weren't as many kind of funny ones as I would have liked. It felt like a lot of them were tugging at the heartstrings and trying to do a lot around social causes and connection. And that could be the state of the world perhaps right now, but I did want a little bit more of, the burping frogs from back in the day, like I expect a little bit.
Well, you're right. I think you don't want to offend anybody, for God forbid. And then also it's just, it's so contentious now. Everybody's kind of feel like they're walking on eggshells. Let's just be nice. I mean, hell, Jesus had an ad.
I was gonna say the one thing we can all agree on is Jesus. Wait a minute.
Those collection plates, $7 million of grandma's dollar bills must have been.
Grandma's dollar bills.
That's the first thing I thought of. Was I'm like, how did Jesus get $7 million?
Well, you see, Brandy, Jesus invented money. So
it just fell from the sky. Must have happened. No, and then like I don't know if you guys remember, because this was early on. There was an ad for the farmer's dog,
yes,
which is a food, and I'm a dog mom, and I cry at all the Sarah McLachlan commercials too. So I thought that was really funny. But that farmer's dog ad, when they were talking about the puppy, and then the woman bringing it through, and she has her own, and I was like all teary eyed. I was like, wait a second, this is supposed to happen.
Manipulation.
I know.
Oh, breathing.
It was
Biscuit cried. She's sitting right here. She's like, you know what? how come you don't you don't pay extra for me for Farmer's Dog? You get me the cheap HEB brand. Well, she's living the large life. So, well, good. I think, any Super Bowl that's close till the very end, I think everybody's going to get big engagement numbers. And
Yeah. Yeah,
listen
no,
to
it was a
talk.
mix. It was a mix of commercials. They were interesting. It was funny. My husband said at one point, he's like, this is the first year where I feel like I can't go. He's like, I can't go to the bathroom or get a snack because all the commercials we're really kind of trying to step it up a little bit. And I think because this was the first year you saw more diversity in terms of alcohol advertising, it was really, really interesting, that wide range. And you guys did a really great recap of that I saw this morning. It's just a lot more commercials. And I think a lot of people didn't realize it because I just that there was only one advertiser before that.
Right.
I wonder next year too. I mean, obviously AB broke exclusivity, but they still had, 3 ads in the national broadcast, or was it 3 minutes in the national broadcast, which was, I guess, 4 total, right? And then the regional. But I wonder what they're going to do next year, right? Do they pull back a little bit? And then maybe we'll see even more Bevalk advertisers, but we'll see. Because at the end of the day, before you came on, Harry was talking about how Molson Coors got the highest ranking per Edo of like engagement, which I think is a good metric because, it's one thing for people to like a commercial, but it's another thing for a commercial to drive behavior, right? And I think it's kind of difficult to link, increased sales to a good commercial. And, how long can that grow apart and Bevalk still spend a ton of money, $7 million for 30 seconds, right? So that's what I'll be looking at next year.
But what's really interesting about that commercial, kind of thinking out loud here, is that if you look at the trends that we know about people drinking across categories and drinking across brands, in their own way, even though it was within beer, they kind of hit that on the nose. And I think most people want to feel like I'm going to drink what I want to drink and what I like. And I think that was a really cool way of saying, here's 3 different brands, arguably could have 3 different taste profiles. And you might think you're one of those, but it almost gives people sort of permission to some degree to say, like, I'm going to drink what I want. And that was a really kind of subversive way of putting out the fact that there is a lot of choice these days, which is what's driving this unprecedented, unpredictable consumer behavior, right, in alcohol.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Let's jump. We could jump anywhere from there, Brandy. Let's jump to spirit.
I'm sorry. Before we wrap that segment up, 2 things. One, I love that Serena Williams was in 2 alcohol ads.
Yeah.
Both referencing old movies. And also Tony Romo was in the AB ad. And of course he's been a Corona pitchman for a long time. What do you guys think about Constellation taking, not having a real presence at the Super Bowl? Is that surprising? Anyone? Bueller?
They have a strategy and they stick to it. And I don't think they really have much to gain from doing a Super Bowl ad and trying to break away from the fighting spirit or find your beach. I mean, they can just keep those running on big games, NBA games, football games, and not have to, go all in on Super Bowl to try and come up with something that isn't what they necessarily do all the time.
I wonder if there's a calculus, and I know AB kind of hinted at this, but I mean, February is a terrible time to advertise beer. I mean, I think it's the lowest volume month of the year,
except for Super Bowl, of course.
Yeah, sometimes Super Bowl's in January, but yeah, I mean, it's just not a great time to. It's kind of like in the old days. You never advertise beer in the morning on radios, or TV. You never advertise on a Monday. All ads should be Thursday through Sunday in the afternoon or evening. That's the old,
But this isn't seasonality. I look at this like occasion. So sports and beer. So it's not as much seasonality, it's sports and beer. So regardless of what time of the year it is, even if you're at a hockey, game, like wherever you are, if you're in a stadium and you're watching sports, those two things are sort of tied together. So that's that, I think, innately the occasion aspect of beer that continues to sort of be one of the only things that is sort of holding on, maybe from that perspective, you know, like you have chicken wings and you have beer. Now, obviously, I'm sure homes across the US and on premise probably saw a wide range of drinking. But, you know, when I went to the liquor store yesterday, my husband ran in and I was watching, first of all, a side note, do you know who are the smartest people I saw yesterday? Was the moms and the Girl Scouts that put the Girl Scout cookie
outside of the liquor store.
I was like watching, I was like, damn, they are so smart. Cause there's all these guys carrying these like huge things of beer out. And then they're like, actually I'll have some cookies too.
That is brilliant.
Those girls are smart. So
talk about occasion based and going to where the sales are. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but I was watching what people were, because this is how my brain works. Like I always watch what people order. I look at menus, I look at back bars. I was observing everyone walking out of the liquor store because it was a big flow of traffic and it was a lot of people carrying beer. I saw some athletic, I saw some RTDs. I didn't see anyone carrying out, you know, wine or spirits really. It was beer, beer, beer.
Who drinks wine anymore? I mean, good Lord.
I will tell you, it's people over 50, 45, 50.
I'm over 50.
Well, not really.
Not really. You're right.
I mean, look at your hat. So
I mean, look at my hat. For those on the radio, I'm wearing a Stetson hat with a turkey feather in it, just to give a little panache. All right. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail you, Jen. Go ahead.
No, that's very, very on brand. No, you know, I was just trying to move the train along. All of these things bleed together. Anyway, you know, speaking of the liquor store, Brandy, and drinking across occasions, right? We saw last week the report from Discus where for the first time, you know, spirits share of revs of Bev Alc has overtaken beers. We chatted about this very briefly. You guys put out a similar report last year predicting that this year that would happen on some level volumetrically. Mm-hmm. What's driving it? I mean, is it well, I guess we know what's driving it, but in your report, I should also note that does not include spirits RTDs, which is interesting that it would overtake it anyway. But is there a way to put the cat back in the bag? Maybe we should ask instead. Is this stoppable, or is this just the way it's going to be?
There's kind of three ways we can look at the data buckets, right? No matter how you slice it. The first one is volume. So on a volume basis, beer is just massive. And volume share beer is still 70% of volume for total beverage alcohol, right? Volume beer is still way, 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 way farther ahead. Even if you put malts-based RTDs with beer, and if you put spirit-based RTDs with spirits, it only adds about 10%. It's not that substantial. So it adds 10% bump on spirits, 10% bump on beer, because most RTDs in the US are malt-based. They are. So volume-wise, beer is always going to be ahead. When we look at dollar value, that's where it makes a different picture. And of course, spirits are more expensive. And we know premiumization has been a long-term trend driving spirits, and it's only getting higher and higher and higher.
Sure.
That's the value perspective that Discus put out, right? And also when you look at RTDs, what's interesting, and you've heard me say this over and over and over again, is why is everyone investing in that ready to drink category? It's the only beverage alcohol category that hasn't fully premiumized. 90% of the volumes in RTDs traditionally have been kind of cheaper stuff. So no one paid attention to it. If you look at what's gone on with wine and beer and spirits, the higher priced items have been growing and growing and growing year over year. So it's very lucrative to think about investing in a category that has the opportunity to premiumize, because there's a lot of money in there. So then the third bucket, right? So we have volume, we have value. And then what we put out last month actually is looking at all last year's share of servings. And it's interesting to talk in share of servings, because if you just do drink by drink, glass of wine, a shot, 1.5 or cocktail, whatever, and beer or an RTD, those serving sizes, it equivalizes. And that's also where spirits is sort of overtaking beer. So 2 out of the 3, value and share of servings, you have spirits overtaking beer volume wise. So I always like to clarify it, because it's, there's different ways of looking at it, and 2 of the 3 tell the same story.
And share of servings is another way of kind of saying share of ethanol, right?
Yes.
And I mean, kind of loosely based.
Yeah, it's sort of looking at it on a drink by drink, but it equivalizes everything on what the industry would consider as sort of an average serving size. So, you know, and of course depends on how you pour your drink, but
Yeah.
but in general, like most bars and restaurants, right, they're measuring to that degree in terms of serving size. And most bottles of beer and RTDs around that. Does it vary? Of course it does, but in general, that's like the industry standard in terms of equivalency, and how everyone sort of looks at it, and it is based on ABV.
Yeah, I think share of ethanol is an important metric because ethanol is really the common denominator that limits the amount you drink. I mean, for most people, right? And so, you know, however you consume your ethanol, it depends on what form factor you're consuming, and that I don't even know where I'm going with this, but the point the point is that if you're going to look at market share other than dollars for the health of an industry, I think share of servings or ethanol is an important metric. All right, so go ahead. Yeah.
No, I mean, I just think it's those are kind of the three ways to look at it in terms of what's been going on. And I guess, Jen, to answer your question, will that ever change? I mean, if you look at the long-term trend lines, right, this has just been happening for quite some time, right? You don't see, and same with wine, is you haven't seen these kind of wild swings. It's either slightly flat, maybe slightly up, but generally just sort of chugs along with the larger volume brands or subsegments. So still wine is what's dragging, or table wine's dragging down wine. There are particularly a few brands of domestic lagers that are dragging down because of volumetrically. And overall, I think we have, and I've talked about this, and I think everyone in the industry knows, we have a very different world than we did 20 years ago. And all of these things, from generational changes, more diversity, there's more products out there for people to choose from. All of those things are not good for beer and actually wine, because there's limited flavor range, and flavor is so critically important when we look at choice and flavor. And even within spirits, there's so many different types of flavor and opportunities to kind of go and trade up, down, sideways, and kind of go around the category of spirits and RTDs. Also, these are the two categories that are growing. And if you look at the aspects around those categories, you can see it's really driven by choice and flavor. And ultimately with beer and wine, sure, you can say a Cabernet is different than a Sauvignon Blanc, and an IPA is different than, a light lager, but ultimately they're still kind of stuck within a certain flavor profile that makes those categories have a much harder time for an innovation perspective to kind of meet that demand that consumers want, which is flavor, flavor, flavor.
I have a question kind of jumping off this. And Brandy, obviously you've got all the BevAlc data, but you're also very in tune with consumer trends. So I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on one of the hottest topics in BevAlc right now. And I guess a hot RTD, you could say, is the Borg. Do you know what I'm talking
about? The Borg.
The Borg, yeah. So I feel like the chat surrounding Gen Z was, they don't drink, but then all these articles come out about the Borg. So is this a
what
surprising...
is the Borg?
Oh my God, this is the best thing ever. Okay, so first of all, Jordan, Gen Z, it's not that they don't drink. So that's not true. So I've been talking a lot. We did this like cool thing on Gen Z. So it's one of my favorite subjects to talk about how they are different. So it's not that they don't drink. They're actually being more discerning about kind of how they drink, and tempo drinking and day drinking. But 21-year-olds are 21-year-olds. So we're generalizing an entire generation, right? So of course they're going to carry a Borg. So I learned about this actually a year ago when I was talking to these college age guys at a neighborhood 4th of July party down the street. And I was kind of like, hey guys, like I hear younger generations are way more sophisticated. So do you guys have like Japanese whiskey in your dorm room? Hey, and they were like, crazy old lady. No, like, no, when we do, everyone just does this Borg. And I'm like, what is that? And it stands for caveat with, this is not a social responsibility thing that we're saying. It stands for Black Outrage Gallon. And what they do is they take a gallon of water, they dump a little bit of it out, they take cheap vodka, pour the whole thing of vodka in there, and they take the Mio flavor drops in any flavor and drop a couple of those in there, and you can make any kind of color or flavor you want, and everyone carries it around when they go Do day drinking?
I have seen this.
Thing.
Yeah, I've seen it on the Tiki Talker.
And they put like liquid IVs in there too.
Right.
And then you have to name your Borg too. So it's like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Humphrey Bogart, Harry calls his Simon Borgson. And
Jordan, did you write this?
No.
Jordan, you're not supposed to pre-prepare these written bits. This is too much.
He's going for stand-up next.
Simon Borgson.
Brandy, I am curious to know, like, what are your takeaways with this kind of phenomenon and lessons we can learn from this?
Yeah, so it's perfect. It aligns with a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about, which is, and I think I did this a couple of years ago. So personalization. So let's talk about all the things, Jordan, you kind of were checking off here. So we have personalization, right? So everybody gets to make their own Borg. Okay. Color, flavor, name it. There's a whole aspect, right, where you are personalizing your drinking experience. That's a really big trend for this generation. They've gone up with personalization. They're ordering these Starbucks secret menus. They can personalize their Starbucks, right? So we've innately built into a generation that's used to kind of getting what they want, how they like it. Okay, so that is like check the box, personalization. Second is flavor. I get to pick whatever flavor I want. I can mix a bunch of flavors. Flavor, I keep saying this, flavor is driving a lot of what we see in beverage alcohol right now and the demand from consumers. So Borgs also check the box on flavor aspects of it. I think obviously Gen Z isn't rolling around in the dough. So there's an element too, of course, of cost per serve, which we know people are becoming smarter around cost per serve and what they can get for ABV. And that's a big element too. If you look at the cost of a Tito's versus a 30 pack of Bud, right? There's those aspects of it, right? And they also want to have kind of their own thing. This is another reason why I think, RTDs check the box of flavor, but also I can kind of have something that's my own. Or if I do want to share with friends, I can get multi-packs and do all this stuff. So there's a lot of these, I think, underlying trends that are taking shape in terms of how they're personalizing, having kind of their own thing, driving flavor, that are really interesting from that perspective. And we know that vodka, so there's a couple of categories. So 60-something% of Gen Z still drinks beer, 50-something%, about half drink wine. They just don't drink wine as much. They're kind of exploring it, but they look at it as a special occasion. Beer, they don't really like as much. Generally speaking, they'll drink it, but it doesn't necessarily offer them as much of that flavor aspect. They're kind of impervious to it a little bit. It's like, okay, yeah, there's beer, but there's so many other interesting things for me to drink. So I'm going to be paying more attention. RTDs are the one category where compared to other generations, Gen Z way over indexes compared to other generations in terms of their preference for RTDs. And if you think about all of the things that they demand, and we even looked at this around diversity, because we know Gen Z is the most diverse generation in American history. And the flavor, the taste, those aspects of inclusivity, they're the generation that's kind of like, take me as I am. This is who I am. Like, that's a lot of their behavior. And because of that, I think that we're seeing RTDs really is over indexing with this generation, which leads me to believe certainly, not only based on the investment everyone's putting in RTDs, but you have a generation that's kind of entering the category where they've known a world, there's been White Claw ever since they've been drinking. For some people 10 years ago, there was no hard seltzer category. So you think about when people are coming into the category and what they're experiencing and how is that going to carry through as they get older. And that's one of the big challenges with the wine industry is everyone said, well, when people get older, they'll be more sophisticated and then they'll just start drinking wine. But it doesn't work that way necessarily with this generation.
Yeah. I have a quick question on that. If I'm reading between the lines there, these guys don't necessarily like beer, right? It sounds like it's kind of their least favorite thing. So to what extent does flavor in some ways not just necessarily denote like cherry or lime or orange, but like as in opposition to beer flavor, as in like we like flavor, AKA not beer flavor. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, but flavored beer does, like all flavored categories, sort of over index. So I think there are certain segments that can do well. And I think that's part of the aspect. I mean, again, beer can be a bit one-dimensional in its flavor profile, just sort of like wine can be. And when you have so many other options, it's, I think, harder for people to stick with just one thing, particularly when you start looking at alcohol base, and that throws it in there. Because remember, we talked about within spirits, there's vodka and tequila and whiskey, and there's all these sort of sub segments that also contribute to the flavor profile of different types of spirits. And I think that's where you have more competition. So we talk about beer versus spirits, but really we're talking about beer versus whiskey versus tequila versus rum versus vodka. Sure. So it's almost an unfair advantage in that way.
Interesting. Yeah.
That's very true. That there's just so many iterations and we talk about the value of spirits going up. I think it's got to be, I don't know how dramatic effect this has, but just high-end whiskey is just, at least anecdotally, it's just on fire. What is high-end whiskey doing? Why is everybody drinking that?
I mean, whiskey has been, we have our data showing, I think last year, that just whiskey, all whiskeys, actually were bigger than vodka for the first time. And that's a big deal. So it's every like 30 years, things start to they go in these cycles where it was whiskey, then vodka became big, and then now it's whiskey. And the whiskey category, I mean, cocktail culture 20 years ago was kind of the first speakeasy when people started really having good quality drinks. And a lot of those cocktails are whiskey based. You also have flavored whiskey. You can't discount Fireball and Tennessee Honey and a lot of these brands that really are bringing people in for flavor, and your palate sort of gets used to it. I'm constantly surprised every time I go out, the amount of people that order old fashions now. It's crazy. Because if you were to think about this, even 15 years ago, it just would have been something like, hey, it's like old white guys are going to order old fashions. And now it's like everybody is doing it. But within high-end whiskey, you have cask strength and barrel aged and just all of these different ranges. So when we go back to choice and flavor, that's a really big element. And also, I think one of the biggest things that's changed that's over the last like 20 years is that alcohol is so much more about lifestyle and luxury, which is part of this premiumization story that didn't used to exist. It was like alcohol might have been like, just it's toilet paper. Like, it doesn't matter. I'll just pick a brand. I won't even order a brand. I'll just get a beer. I'll just get a gin and tonic. But now we've seen with premiumization, with more education, with influencers and celebrities and bartenders and like all of these elements, suddenly people are starting to treat alcohol like this affordable luxury that represents a little bit of who they are. So you get this kind of trading up element like you would with a really cool pair of sneakers or a nice handbag. So alcohol's become almost a luxury commodity in that way, which is why you see high-end whiskeys and some of these cultish sort of whiskeys are becoming things that people are kind of collecting and wanting to say, I've got this bottle that no one else has. And it's a discovery and a sharing element that to me is sort of fitting around a lifestyle aspect that alcohol has really done a very good job of building into lifestyle.
All right, let's bring it home with, unless somebody else has anything.
I have one more question. Sorry. Brandy, I have been noticing for like maybe the past 6 months to a year, just a lot more chatter online and mainstream press articles about the notion that the only good amount of alcohol is no alcohol. And I'm seeing a lot of abstinence type messaging getting traction. Are we seeing that in the data at all? You mentioned that Gen Z, we all say they don't drink, but they actually do. What are you seeing in that regard?
So like no alcohol products are, still like 1% of total bev alcohol volumes, right? So I think we've seen sort of this health and wellness and moderation trend for some time. And then we went through a global pandemic and it goes back to choice. There used to be like O'Doul's and that was it. And then you have a brand like Athletic that comes along and people are like, oh, this tastes good and it's an option. So I think like any aspect of white space, when we look at beverage, we have a segment that has opportunity around these kind of functional alcohol alternatives. All this is bleeding over from traditional beverage. And I pay a lot of attention to the functional beverages and the CBD beverages and the nootropics. And like, you see the flavor and the functional aspects and this athleisure and hydration and all these buzzwords happening in traditional beverage, and they're kind of pushed over into alcohol, mainly through RTDs. But I think the low alcohol space, why it's grown, is you see so many new brands that have come to market that didn't exist before. And people want options to stay in these social alcohol occasions. And they want to kind of monitor ABV. So we see a lot of people that they kind of go back and forth. So abstainers are a portion of folks, but there's also people that kind of want to moderate in between and have those options. And now there's just more product beyond just saying, I want a Diet Coke or a water, where people can kind of do that. And interestingly, with Gen Z, going back to what Jordan was asking, they're not as big into the moderation stuff. They don't care about the no alcohol. For them, it's trading to low alcohol from a soft drink. So they're going to not drink, they'll just drink water, because they're not going to spend the money they don't have on paying for non-alcoholic beer. They're like, I'm either going to drink or I'm not going to drink, but I like the idea of doing a little bit of a low alcohol aspect. And it's also a little bit less about health and wellness. For them, I think it's more about that tempo drinking element. Is they tend to day drink more, they're more socialized, and there's that element of wanting to stay in control, which is such an important factor. You know, we can blame social media, I think, for everything now, but in general, that aspect of wanting to make sure that I feel like the millennials taught everybody the lessons of what happens when you maybe drink too much on social media and how it can like ruin your life, and it stays alive forever online, and that employers look at that type of stuff. So I think you have a generation now that's a little bit savvier to understanding what they need to pay attention to in terms of their online brand and personality. I think moderation has an element of that. And then older generations, it's a health aspect. It means more for them because they know innately alcohol is not good for them, but they want options to sort of have the flavor and have the experience, but have something and have that quality and that luxury. But also just be able to moderate in this space. So I know there's a lot of concern around this, particularly for folks in the industry, but ultimately, if you look at the opportunities, it's still small. You have such a big opportunity to kind of keep, like the Heineken 0.0 ad, right? It's a better opportunity if you have someone who's a Heineken drinker that likes the flavor of Heineken, that you can give them that experience, that beer experience and that occasion, and just give them an ABV to trade to or no ABV to trade to. So I think it's a big opportunity for alcohol producers in that way.
I agree. I think you really can't discount or I think or underscore the importance of today's youth, that there are rolling cameras everywhere in their phones that we didn't. When I say we, I'm talking about my generation did not have. You know, I didn't have it till I was in my 40s, but I mean, I can imagine my behavior would have been vastly different as a young man had people been filming me all the time and knowing that it was going to be permanently on a screen and a computer somewhere. And, you know, everybody kind of trashes social media, but maybe that's a good aspect, that maybe behaviors are improving in general. I don't know. I'm just trying to look at a silver lining here. Right, Jordan? I mean, you're the youngest one here. You've had a camera on you all your life.
That's why I stay far away from social media. So
yeah, I have noticed that.
Why do you? Well, so Jordan, do you drink non-alcoholic beers and stuff? Like, why do you drink?
No, I drink. I just, like you said, I would rather just have a glass of water. I mean, to me, it's kind of empty calories. Sorry, Bill and everyone else out there, but I'd prefer water or juice. You know. So
just a juicy cup for the baby, little sippy cup. Here we go.
Well, then we get into the whole sugar conversation, right? Which I'm also finding really interesting because, you know, hard seltzers, when they started, it was all about sort of no sugar, no carbs. So it's that kind of health messaging. And when we ask consumers about, because RTD category is so wide, and then you have like what Molson's come out with, which is a non-alcoholic cocktail, right? But it's high in sugar, and a lot of these spirit-based cocktails, they all are high in sugar. There's some that try not to be high in sugar, but they don't taste as good, right? So it's sort of like you have this dichotomy of, it's like if you're going to do the hard seltzer, very light flavor, low calorie, no sugar, that's kind of one category, and then you have the I'm going full on flavor with some of these whether it's Mike's or the Twisted Teas or any of these FABs, they're all full on flavor, higher in calories and higher in sugar. And so we always get this question where people think it has to be sort of one or the other. And ultimately, I feel like when people are indulging, like it's to build up what Jordan was saying, if you're gonna have something to drink, like you might as well go all in from that perspective, right? But it depends on who you are, right? And what matters to you and how much are you watching your dietary intake, how often do you drink a week, right? It's a very personal thing.
Yeah. All right, let's bring it home with the on-premise, because this is something that you talked about at our summit that I thought was one of the most provocative points. And we've also been reporting on things from places like CGA that say, hey, we're back to pre-pandemic levels of traffic, but that doesn't necessarily mean that BevAlc is doing as well now in the on-premise as it was before, right? Before the pandemic. So just tell us kind of, what you said at our summit about what the future of the on-premise is for BevAlc, and especially like the importance of the home premise and how that changes things.
Yeah, well, I mean, Americans have always been drinking at home, right? We have that like 80-20 split. It's been around forever, which is 80% roughly by every category is purchased at retail and brought to consume at home. 20% on premise. We've always been that way. Even before the pandemic, we were tracking sort of softening in on-premise. So less outlets over time. So when there's less outlets, that obviously hurts on-premise. And also when you look at sort of price increases, we're always a little bit higher in the on-premise versus retail. And so there's an element that also was exacerbated because of the pandemic with price sensitivity, people being more comfortable. So we kind of just really reinforced a lot of the behavior that was already taking place. And so now when we head into these sort of economic conditions, are we going to have a recession, inflation, CPI, GDP, like all this analysis we've done and cost sensitivity? Well, on-premise prices have gotten, even though there's price increases everywhere, you feel it more in the on-premise for sure. So people start to make more of a, let me do the math. Well, if I'm going to go out and have a couple of old fashions at a really cool cocktail bar, I'm probably paying anywhere from $12 to $20 for that drink, depending on where you are. And lately, I mean, I've been in Miami, I've been London, like everywhere I go, when I go to a lot of these places, I'm shocked. It's like average is like $20 for a cocktail in most places. It's crazy. And you see a lot of young people out there ordering these rounds of drinks. And I'm like, that's going to bankrupt you, but nonetheless, but you think about it, that's an experience play. So if I'm going to go out and spend that kind of money, then who am I going out with? Is it I'm going out because I want to demand that experience, that on-premise experience has to really deliver. Otherwise, I can have my friends over at home, buy a bottle of, Maker's Mark or Woodford or whatever, and that's $30 and I can get 3 or 5 or 6 or 7 drinks from that. So I think, and there's a show off element too, right? That you see a lot more where consumers are liking the idea of saying, I have a cool home bar, I got all the mixing equipment, or I'm learning how. And I see this on TikTok all the time too, with younger consumers. They do these fun things where they're recreating cocktails and they're doing colorful things, and they're doing theme nights. So there's sort of this element where people are kind of creating their own experiences at home, which makes it harder for the on-premise to compete, not only on price, but on that experience element. So we have smarter consumers. We have Gen Z that knows what these drinks are. We know that Gen Z spends more than boomers on stuff. So they're coming into the category kind of already with that premiumization lens and knowing how to make drinks that most of us that are in older generations probably didn't know how to make. So we're having kind of a starting point that's very different now. So when you think to the future, it's going to put a little bit more pressure on behaviors that we may have thought were sort of normalized before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anything you like to make at home?
I am a martini drinker. I'm just like a vodka dirty martini drinker. It's my middle-aged, although they're back now, I don't apologize as much. I always make this joke, but like every time I order a dirty martini, I always feel like I need to apologize to the bartender about it. Like, I'm sorry, but I do. I love old fashions and I love Negronis, and but I kind of am traditional when it comes to just a full-on vodka, I guess, to that degree.
Listen, there's nothing wrong with the ice duck on the pond, ice on the top martini. Perfecto. It's the best drink ever. And And the other thing I was just thinking about, there's a whole subreddit or a couple of subreddits that are nothing about home, look at my home bar, and people just put pictures of their home bar, and everybody's trying to outdo each other and being these elaborate bars. And then of course, gaming, playing video games is just such a kind of a new entertainment, not new, but an entertainment venue that younger generations, almost all of them do, and it's perfect for drinking, because it heightens the experience. I mean, you can drink Ghost if you want to, get a little caffeine in between, but if you're not putting, what I do is I get a gallon jug, I empty it out, I pour in it half vodka, half Ghost, a couple of Skittles just for fun, a couple of Warheads, a little bit of bacon, and then I shake it up, and then I just play War of Warcraft for 10 hours straight, and that's my Saturday. Done. Brooks and done.
Yeah, and you don't have to go anywhere, right? Because this is the other thing. Think about, like, Ubers are expensive, and like it's just the cost of going out is expensive, So I think
I get on my skateboard after that.
I've been seeing those videos, and I have to look away a lot of the time. So I'm waiting for that rock to be worried for you. I'm really worried.
Well, it's not like I'm top heavy or anything. Or
Harry, by the way, you left a piece of equipment at the bar the other day, and I have it. So I don't know if it's to your one wheel, if it's anyway.
Oh, it's a piece of the, I think my pump. Yeah, that's all right. You can have it.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Brandy, for being on BeerNet Radio. I hope all your dreams have come true, and if not, they will come true in the near future. We value your commentary, and we sure did enjoy having you at the summit. I know our audience did as well. So, any last minute thoughts on 2023 and things we should watch out for in the BevAlc space?
I think this is going to be a really interesting year of kind of the stickiness factor. I keep using that term because normalization, we're all saying that, but this is kind of that year where I feel like we're really going to see the patterns start to go back, whatever they are now. It's like starting from, because we keep saying 2019, but US bucked all of those trends because there were no real changes in terms of consumption or the categories that we're winning or losing. So now I think what's going to be really interesting is seeing how we keep pace with that, and what are the sort of sub segments that we're going to see more demand, like agave, right? Like tequila, the growth of tequila, but now all these other agave alternatives. Everyone keeps asking about, is rum going to premiumize next? Those key elements. I think the RTD space, of course, spirit versus malt, even though from a size perspective, they're very different from a value perspective. And very much like I think we saw with craft beer and are seeing with craft beer, there's going to be this reduction in SKUs. It has to happen. You hear it from retailers now. There's only so much cold box space. I think it's going to be really interesting to figure out how retailers start to categorize stuff. And then also this alcohol-based element where we know there are more beer and wine only outlets in the US. So it's much more advantageous for companies to have a beer or malt or wine base to get into more outlets. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how the legalization and also going to market with a wine or a malt-based cocktail, because you see a lot of those, how is that going to play out, over time? And these vodka-based seltzer versions of the branded malt ones, it's going to be right there. We're going to see right away kind of what are people choosing,
Right. That to me is going to be interesting. Is that even a proposition that people were looking for, or is it just something that the industry is just chasing high noon? I don't know yet. I think that we don't know yet. It's too early, right? So, all right.
But taste good wins.
Yeah.
Wins.
Wins.
That's what it comes down to at the end of the day. Like, you've seen a lot of things that have failed and not, and then things that have done well. And I think taste and flavor are always paramount in that category and are kind of driving everything. So all alcohol producers now are really trying to place bets on what's next and how long these trends are going to sort of last. in that element. So it's going to be really interesting. The amount of innovation that I've seen, particularly in the past couple of years, and that I know is coming, I think is going to be really telling to this year.
Right. Okay. Well, all right. Well, thanks guys for being on, and we'll see you down the road, Brandy. Take care of yourself.
Thank you. Enjoy your borg. Do not drink your borg while you're on your skateboard.
Right.
Okay. Well, no promises here. All right. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thanks.